Hello everyone, welcome to Scorched Earth Toys at anymoon.com's review of MegaHouse's 1/15 scale ride armor toys. Now in high definition, now including each variant. These toys debuted in February 2008 with a sticker price of 5,800 yen. That was 1 month after CMs had debuted their 1/18 scale, which listed at 6,000 yen. So I will discuss a little bit in this review how the two toys differ. They also came out about a year before Beagle released their 1/10 ride armor toys, which also were distributed by Toynami as Robotech Masterpiece toys. Those are definitely the be-all, end-all of Mospeada ride armor toys, but those toys also were 4 times the price of these toys. So let's take a closer look at what you got. In February 2008, we got both Sticks VR52F, aka Scott, and Ray, aka Rand's VR52T. Let's focus on Stick for a moment here. Stick comes with 2 sets of fixed posed hands, an optional helmetless head, a scope for armor mode, a big gun with a hand already affixed to it, a kickstand, instructions, and a rudimentary display stand that I'll talk about in a little bit here. Some stores also had exclusive stickers. Not exactly sure what the deal was with that, but some of these toys have them, some of them don't. More often they do not. The toy comes packaged in bike mode, as you can see here. Wheels are a little bit small. That was good for armor mode, bad for bike mode, and that was something that MegaHouse addressed later. The kickstand is teeny tiny and terrible. It barely functions. It plugs in via a peg sideways into what would become the hip armor, and it's very small, and the toy leans to one side when you're using it. Not that that's all that bad, but it pops off sometimes and can be frustrating. Speaking of popping off sometimes, there goes the kickstand. Sometimes the handles pop off too. Now, one of the big gripes about this toy is that it's a parts former. I will get into that more in a moment, but that handle popping off is symptomatic of that. As you can see, the rider can ride the toy. The wheels do not roll. The rider might not look the most natural, but it's not terrible either. The helmeted head has a good ability to arch upward. I'll get into articulation of the rider a little bit more in a bit, but it would have been better if there was a pivot point at the base of the neck and the top of the neck to get a little bit more natural look out of it. Here is a quick line art comparison of the bike in bike mode. You can see the MegaHouse is blocky. Doesn't quite fill out quite as nicely as the original line art. In this scale, it would have been really hard to accomplish anything near the line art. So you got to give them some credit for what they have done, but still, obviously, a lot of room for improvement. All right, let's do a quick discussion of the articulation of the rider figure. His helmet does have a visor that can be pulled up. I wasn't particularly impressed with the face of the rider figures. He looks to me to be a little narrow-headed, but you know, good enough. You can pop the head off, it's on a ball joint, and replace it with the optional head that came with the toy. One thing to point out, this is the helmet. This is the helmetless head. The back of the helmetless head comes down lower than the helmeted head, which means you will not be able to tilt it as far forward when in bike mode. So here, let's go ahead and put his helmetless head on. Also, a little weird, you can see kind of the gap between the neck and the peg for the ball from some angles, so that isn't exactly ideal. The neck also looks pretty long, and that's necessary for the way this whole toy comes together, which you will see more later. Ball joints at the shoulders, somewhat exposed. There's no second ball joint inside for you to pivot the shoulder up and down, which is a little bit of a bummer. Rotation point right below the shoulder, elbow that lets you get 90 degrees of motion. The hands also are on a ball joint, which you can pop off and replace with any of the fixed posed options that the toy comes with, and then obviously rotate however you want to do that. you have a pivot point at the top of the, well, I guess at the chest, and then also at the waist. Big ball joints obviously at the hips. Not very attractive how they did that. You can pull the leg all the way up, rotate it. Now that knee guard coming off is a very common issue. And also so is that seam in the hip. It just pops back on. There was a little, oh my god, upside down, little slot in the back. Goes right on like that. Alright, going down you have the foot, and it's on a ball joint, so you can actually tilt it. So that is all good stuff. Knee, again, very similar to the elbow joint, lets you come back. There are times where I kind of wish there was a twist point at the knee, even though that's not maybe anatomically correct. It would help for certain poses. So that is your rider in a nutshell. Since we're talking about stick right now, I guess I should bring up his optional gun. I mentioned before, the hand is affixed to it already, which is actually beneficial on a toy this size, because you don't have to worry about it falling off on you. The hand from the gun, that is. So, decently attractive, although obviously not without its flaws, and decently articulated, although with room for improvement. Ray's toy, while very similar to Stick's toy, does have some key differences. Obviously you get the gun on the front of the bike, whereas Stick has missiles, Ray had a gun, just like in the show. The gun handle comes down very low, very close to where the wheel meets the ground. That makes it so you never need to use the kickstand. That's a benefit. Obviously it wouldn't be very functional if this were a real motorcycle. I've got the Helmetless Head on Ray. Again, it has hair that comes down and makes it so you can't tilt the head back, which is less good for actually riding the bike, although he still can, and it's not a problem. To make Ray's bike more exciting to purchase, MegaHouse gave us saddlebags. I didn't really have the heart. There's the display stand. I didn't really have the heart to open up my saddlebags, but there they are. You also get the option to remove the gun and put this blank piece of armored gauntlet. I will do that very shortly here. This is really less about the motorcycle and being able to have a completely bare motorcycle, and more about the ride armor and really the lack of articulation that we have at the elbow. So you would obviously need the kickstand now that the gun's not there. You have the ability to rotate up here. You don't have the ability to rotate at the forearm, and so if Ray were holding his big gun, the armor wouldn't be able to attach to the forearm. So what they instead do is give you a gimmick that lets you pull off that armor, put the gun in his hand. Let's see if I can do that real quick. So you can put the gun in his hand, and then you can use this armor attached to the forearm to sort of simulate that all being one piece when you transform him into ride armor mode. Here's a quick line art comparison that shows you the CM's toy and the MegaHouse toys and how their rider figures stacked up. I would give the edge to the CM's toy even though it's slightly smaller. Here's a scale comparison so you could see the sizes of the ride armor toys that have come out and what their rider figures measured up at. Next up in the MegaHouse releases was the event-exclusive black VR52F. This is the black stick toy. It comes with all the same accessories that the original stick toy came with, except you also got a sticker sheet which included a mustache in case you wanted to create your own Jonathan Wolf character. On the left you could see is the black stick figure. He has some slightly dark gray accents to him. He does not have all of the Mars base markings, so you can kind of do whatever you wanted with him. Obviously he has brown hair. but otherwise it's a stick head with a tan. There is one improvement that we first saw on the black stick, and that is that at below the elbow they added a rotation point. So I just complained that the lack of this rotation point had made it so the VR52T toy kind of had to make some questionable choices with what to do with the gun. That was addressed in time for the stick toy, which probably didn't need it as much. Here is the black Ride Armor toy next to the original stick release. You can see there's glossy black, matte black, silver, dark gray accents, and just tiny little gold trim bits to make it a little less, well, to make it more exciting than just a straight black paint job. So it does look good. The kickstand is in silver. You still got the small tires on this release. Looks like this from above, this from below, as opposed to Stick's toy. The other nice change that we saw when we got the black stick toy was that the tray that everything came in, the plastic tray, they rounded out the holes that the items were put in. Let's see if I could show you this just a little bit. This is just user friendly. So they made it so you can actually reach your finger in there and pull something out, because it's now got a little bit of a slant to it. Whereas before it was like playing Operation, where the cutout for this item was exactly the size of the item, so it was really hard. You had to poke your finger in from behind to get things loose. So just a nice little user-friendly change there. In August 2008, MegaHouse beat CMs to the market with a VR41 toy by a month. They give us pretty much the same accessories that came with the stick toy, except instead of Stick's big gun, we got a Gallant rifle. And unlike Stick's big gun, the Gallant rifle comes with a separate hand for holding it. Otherwise, you got all the same accessories: the scope, the kickstand, the helmetless head, and instructions, as well as the display stand. Also, we got these red missiles on a sprue. That's really more for armor mode. I will be showing you that more in a bit, but the front of the bike opens up and there are missiles there. A gimmick we saw in the actual show fairly often, unlike the blades, which never actually made it. But I will show you the blades more in armor mode. As you can see, the bike has a completely brand new sculpt in, well, I guess in certain areas. The front of the bike is new and different, the gauntlets are new and different, and the tail of the bike is new and different. So here you can see the MegaHouse black toy. The back had two exhausts. This has a central exhaust. Obviously there was a very blocky front. This has the more angular front. Also, you would note that the wheels are bigger on the VR41. In response to complaints, MegaHouse increased the size of the wheels. I'll show you what that does to armor mode. That also made it so the kickstand increased in size. It still gives you a little bit of a lean, but not too bad. So the rider figure does have the same forearm improvement that we saw on the black stick, as one would hope, right? So they made an improvement and they kept it. Here's the accessory gun that comes with yellow, which is nice to have. There is the helmetless head, which I have on the toy right now. You can see the hair does come all the way down the back, which makes this a very poor head to use when actually trying to make him look like he's riding the motorcycle. They did give us a new helmet, which is correct for the line art. The helmet does not come across the front of the face, like you can see here on the VR52F helmet or the VR52T helmet. And the visor does come down to cover the head completely. The head doesn't look very good, again, within the helmeted head. So I would say have the visor down when using the helmet, or use the helmetless head. And the second to last MegaHouse release was a dark stick variant. This is the very first toy, the stick toy that we already viewed, but with a black and gray and white paint scheme, and with the bigger tires of later releases. I no longer have mine because it broke the first time I tried to transform it. It's a non-canon paint scheme. It's as if Scott or Stick had been part of Sue Graham's landing party instead of the 3rd Expeditionary Force Mars Attack Wave, whatever you want to call it. The final release was another event-exclusive black version, this time of Yellow's VR41. It gave us Yellow as a blonde, and it comes with all the exact same accessories as the previous Yellow toy, and the same VR41, but this time in a black, metallic light blue, and gunmetal gray paint scheme that I think looks pretty slick. So that was it. We never got a Houquet release, or Fouquet, or Rook, even though they had teased that she was coming. She never did. Alright, let's check out the armor modes. I have a separate video where I'll go through the complete transformation of this toy, but I will briefly begin transformation here so you can kind of get a better feel for this toy. Really, it doesn't transform so much as it disassembles and then reassembles. So you take off those gauntlets, you take off these sides on the front of the toy, you separate the front of the bike, and then that exposes the front fork, the radiator, and then those the grips. So you pull forward, and there you go. So that removes. This never goes back on. Obviously, one of the handles flew off entirely. Then you take off these sides. That become the hip armors. There, the whole back wheel popped off the arm. So you can see it. Everything just kind of pegs together. It unpegs, and then you move. So there's pieces falling off left and right. They're not necessarily supposed to fall apart. So transformation on this toy is, well, it leaves a lot to be desired. When you're through with transformation, armor mode looks like this. It's really not bad looking, but it's not the most functional either. Stuff like that happens all the time. You can see my stick has a very loose side panel, so the chest doesn't stay together. This is by far the worst example of the toy I have. Other problems that will happen are these little bits will get loose and they will pop off on you. Then the toy inside will get a little squirrely. It's just miserable to handle, particularly this stick toy I own. And I could certainly use a little bit of glue and touch up a couple places to make things tighter. And this is, again, my other toys are much better, but none of them are really great. They all will pop off. Some part of them will pop off during handling. So, fairly miserable experience in handling the toy, but it does look decent before it starts popping apart on you. My Ray toy is a much better apple than my stick toy, but still definitely frustrating to handle. Now, one thing to discuss here is the weight of the toy is clearly well over the back. So if you want to have them stand without the display stand, it is going to be difficult to pull off. You're going to have to do some really crazy poses, make them kneel, something like that. Or you can use the display stand, which is basically just a shelf. You just park the toy on. There's a hole in the foot. You can use a peg in the display stand. I'll show you the other option with this display stand in a moment. But once you use that, it's obviously a whole lot easier to do whatever you want with these toys. The display stand comes with a second connector piece, so you can remove the shelf and add this piece here, which is a hinged clamp. So we put that on top of this piece. Now, part of the problem with this is there's just a little rubber screw, and that kind of clamps into that. So obviously it just popped off in my hand before I even put a toy on there, so that's not a good omen. Here is the black ride armor in armor mode. Looks pretty good. Again, I think most of these toys do look pretty good as long as you ignore how poorly they handle. So to connect to the new display stand piece, there's a little peg, there is a hole, there are two little slots to go with these two forks in the back. It takes a lot of pressure. You'll probably pop something off your toy doing this. Let's see if I can do it here. Okay. maybe a better way to do it would be just to connect this piece of the display stand connector without the rest. There it goes. And then slide it on like so. Okay. So now I did have one wheel come off. That's happens all the time. But you can see I also have a pretty severe lean backwards going on right now. Let's get that piece in. So if you wanted to do like some falling away shooting poses, obviously you'd bring the legs in a little bit. This works for that. It's more meant for the diving forward shooting poses. The joints are a little bit loose, which again doesn't help if you're trying not to use a display stand because the toy has a hard time standing because it's so loose. But there you go. This is the other option for your display stand usage. Alright, here we have Yellow's toy, and I mentioned earlier that Yellow came with bigger tires and that was a little bit of a problem in armor mode. And here you can see that tire is rubbing pretty much right up against the shoulders. So that is the only issue with the bigger tires as far as armor mode is concerned. On the other toys with the smaller tires, the previous releases, there's plenty of room with the shoulder. And there's not a lot of ability to articulate the shoulder back into the wheel, so it's not that big of a deal. The Yellow toy also has opening missile bays up at the front. And it comes with a scope. Now, in order to use the scope with the Yellow toy, you need to plop it in front of the hinge. And it doesn't work particularly well. While I struggle to get Yellow's scope in, let's do a quick line art comparison of the CMs and MegaHouse VR41 toys. You can see both of them take pretty big liberties with the line art. And whether or not that line art was an obtainable goal is kind of left for us to ponder, since Beagle never actually attempted it. Obviously, that's a shame. So, which one comes closer? You be the judge. There we go. You might have heard the click of it. Not easy to get in there, but you can. You can also knock it right off. The bigger wheels seem to mean that the wheels pop off their little peg a lot more often. So that's kind of frustrating. Also, the head is somewhat recessed into the chest. So you can get him to look up and then look over his armor. But it's obviously not very ideal. The other toys, the VR52F and Ts, do come with a scope as well. Same thing, you just push really hard. Again, these wheels popping off the back, not very fun to handle toys. This lets you do the whole iconic stick firing as missiles, but it does have that scope is touching the helmet. So, a little awkward in their implementation of that accessory. Although never actually shown in Mospeada or Robotech's The New Generation, the blades are kind of the most iconic element of the VR41, and here you can see I have them extended on the black VR41 release. I really liked what they did with the color scheme on this toy. I think it worked out really well. To extend the blades, you remove the gauntlet. Now, that piece is not supposed to come off with the gauntlet, but it does almost every single time. But there's a little plastic piece in the back there you can push forward, and then you could pinch, and there you have your extended blades. You just pop them on the toy, like so, and there you have it. So a lot of people ask me, if you can't buy a Beagle ride armor, should you get a CM's 1/18 scale ride armor, or should you get the 1/15 scale MegaHouse toys? Obviously, that comes down to what's really important to you. If you want to have the whole gang, you need to buy the CM's toys, since MegaHouse never made a Houquet or Rook. If you are less interested in that and more interested in which one's better handling, the way I usually feel about that is whichever toy I handled last is the one I would not recommend. So right now I'm handling a MegaHouse toy, I'd probably say I'd recommend the CM's toy. But if tomorrow I handle a CM's toy, I'd recommend the MegaHouse toy, because they're both really frustrating for lots of both similar and different reasons. So it's kind of up to you what you can stomach. I highly recommend you check out my CM's review and see where you fall on that one. Obviously, if you got the coin, well worth saving up for a Beagle instead. Thanks for viewing.